Welcome back, Source Nation. You're listening to Sports Tuesday with Steve Manderson.
Welcome back to Sports Tuesday. I am Steve Manderson, and my next guest is the Executive Director of the New York State Baseball Hall of Fame. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't know there was one, but I'll tell the story when I bring on my guest. Again, he is the Executive Director of the New York State Baseball Hall of Fame, and we'll be talking about the past inductees and the present 2017. Let me bring on right now, Source Nation, Rene LeRoux. Rene, how are you?
Great, Steve. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
No problem. I thank you for coming on. Now, as I was just saying, I did not know that there was a New York State Baseball Hall of Fame, and I'm embarrassed, being a native New Yorker all my life. I should have known this, but how I found out, one of your inductees for this year has been a guest on my show twice, and he was inducted this year, and he was on Facebook talking about he was just inducted into the Hall of Fame, and the person I'm talking about is Marty Appel.
Sure.
Best-selling author, and so I'm like, New York State Baseball Hall of Fame, and I looked into it, and I said, oh my God, there is one. And now, this Hall of Fame was put together in 2000. You started this in 2011. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now what was the idea behind it? What was the fact that you felt that New York? Well, actually, being New York is one of the sports capitals of the world, I guess it made sense to finally come up with one. But what gave you the idea?
Well, we have a rich history of baseball in upstate New York, and it actually started with a fellow named Johnny Padres, who pitched the Brooklyn Dodgers to the first World Series victory the Dodgers ever had in 1955 when he beat the Yankees 2-0 in Game 7. And Johnny was from a little bit north of Glens Falls, New York, which is maybe an hour north of Albany. And Johnny was a wonderful guy, a famous Brooklyn Dodger, and happy-go-lucky guy, was a wonderful man. And I got to know him pretty well, and after, researching his career, a fellow like John isn't going to make Cooperstown, and many people aren't. They sort of are deserved to be there. So it just makes sense to create this. We ran a search of all the players that were born in New York State, but it's not just for Major League players. It's for authors like Marty, high school coaches, umpires, college coaches. And last year we inducted the Little League team from Maine Endwell that won the Little League World Championship, beat South Korea 2-1, capping off a 24-0 perfect season. So if you have a body of work where you've contributed something to the game and you have a legacy, then you're going to be considered for our Hall of Fame.
So it's pretty much what you've accomplished pretty much in the state of New York. That's basically what it is. Is that correct?
Correct. We divided the state into 3 geographic territories. Western New York, which is basically from Utica, Rochester, Syracuse, Buffalo, upstate, which is Kingston, north to Canada, and downstate, which is Kingston south, including Long Island.
Okay. Well, let's start with the first inductees in 2011, and pretty much not many people will know or recognize any of these players. Like, for instance, Bob Weaver, Dan Peltier, Mike Serbelik, Phil Donnelly, Randy St. Clair. Now, he might be familiar to me. A lot of these players I would assume were more like role players, no major stars in this group. What about this first group of players that qualified to be inducted?
The first year, we technically did not cover the entire state of New York, and it basically went region. And because that was so successful, people approached myself and our committee and said, why don't you expand it to the entire state? So the second year, we really went on a statewide format. Donnelly was a star at Notre Dame. Peltier played for the Texas Rangers for Bobby Valentine. Randy St. Clair was a longtime pitcher and then pitching coach in the major leagues for many years. His dad, Ebba St. Clair, played for the Brooklyn Dodgers also. It was a father-son thing. Bob Weaver, nobody will ever know who he was because he was stuck behind Johnny Bench as a catcher in the Red organization. So, yeah, there was, but all these people that got inducted were lifers. They all have baseball in their blood, and they all contribute something to the game. And you're right, the first year we didn't really have a lot of famous people. Padres was the guy who we really focused everything around. And, there was some people, like Johnny Evers was the second baseman on the Cub team in 1906, 1908, tinkered to Evers to Chance. He was from Troy, New York. He was a 5'7", 140-pound second baseman who ate nails for breakfast. Tough guy. And so some of those guys were, were well known. There was a guy named King Kelly who was really probably the inspiration for Casey at the bat. Handlebar mustache guy who could outdrink anybody in the house and would walk into a tavern and buy everybody a beer and star for the Red Sox. And so there's a rich history of a lot of these people. And from there it got easier because as we expanded it to include the entire state, that opened up the door for people like this year. We're going to have Sandy Koufax and Carly Stremski and Marty and Sean Dunston from the Bronx and some other people that make for a very special class this year. But last year, for instance, Willie Randolph and John Franco were our big two names that got in. And you can't meet two nicer gentlemen than Willie Randolph and John Franco. And when you meet these guys for the first time, it's a little humbling, and you've seen them on TV so many times and World Series play and everything, and they're just so real and down to earth, and they were a real joy to have come. And Steve, the really nice thing about like Willie and John particularly, in their mind, they know this is their Cooperstown, so they take it seriously. And they came and they gave wonderful speeches and talked about growing up, in the game and playing youth baseball. And, you could talk to Willie for hours and hours. And, I would talk to him about Billy and Reggie and Ricky Henderson. And I asked him one day, we were talking, and I said, tell me about Thurman Munson. Because Marty wrote that wonderful book about Thurman, which was spectacular. And Willie sort of got quiet, and he said, Rennie, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about Thurman or miss him. He said he was our captain, and he said in the clubhouse he was the guy that would give you a hot foot, and he was a practical joker and prankster. And if you struck out 4 times, he'd come up and say, "Well, you struck out 4 times today. How's it feel?" But he did it in a nice way, so that he was
right.
the glue that kept that team together, And he said it was just heartbreaking when he passed. And Willie scored the winning run the first game they played after the funeral when Mercer drove him in against the Orioles, and Willie said he had tears in his eyes.
Yes, I remember that game.
So
yes.
Willie was a great guy.
No, he was. I mean, he is. I'm saying he was. He is. But he was a great player for the Yankees, most definitely. In the 2012 inductees, amongst them, the Governor Mario Cuomo. Now,
Yes.
And you had Pittsburgh Pirates. Did he at one point play like minor league baseball in the Pirates organization, or
he did?
What was it about? He did play
it's
minor league
great
ball?
Story. He got drafted by Branch Rickey, who was the general manager of the Pirates after the Dodgers fired him. And Mario hit a home run against Whitey Ford at a summer game that ended up being 1-0, and there were scouts there. And so Branch Rickey gave him a $3,000 signing bonus. And so Mario went home, gave it to his dad, and said, "Dad, this is for you. You and Mom, to make things a little easier for you." And his dad said, "What does this mean?" He took the check and he ran to the corner bank, and he asked the banker, "What does this mean? Is this money good?" And the Italian banker said, "Oh, yes, congratulations, your son's going to be a baseball player." So he went home and he said to Mario, "Does this mean that go to college?" And Mario said, "Well, yes, Dad, I report to the Pirates." And his father tore the check in half and said, "No, you go to college."
Oh, my God.
So he has to go back to Branch Rickey and says, "Mr. Rickey, I'm so sorry, but I can't accept the money." And he went to St. John's. And Branch Rickey looked at him and said, "Your dad is 100% correct. I'm going to write you another check, and when you graduate, you cash the check and you report to play." So he graduated from St. John's, and he reported to play. And he was playing in the deep South. They didn't have batting helmets back then. And he took one behind his ear and had an edema on his brain with bleeding, and they rushed him to the hospital, and they operated and drilled and relieved the swelling, and he turned out fine. It was not a problem. And the doctor said, "Mario, you're good to go, except if you ever get hit in that spot again, you're done. You'll be dead before you hit the ground." So Mario decided his baseball career was over and went to law school. But in his life, Steve, Mario loved his wife Matilda and his children first, and he loved baseball second.
Right.
And he was a huge Yankee fan, and he was very good friends in later life with Mickey Mantle. Mario was good about funding baseball parks across New York State, minor league stadiums. And so one day he gets a phone call from Mickey Mantle. And Mickey says, Governor, you're going to Syracuse tomorrow. You're going to dedicate a new park. Can I go with you? And Mario said, "Sure, absolutely. I'll pick you up and we'll go over." Now, this was all a setup, for Mario. So they go to the ballpark and they had the big festivities and publicity. And out behind the pitcher's mound were 2 big easels covered, with cloth. and Mickey Mantle comes up, and he says, I'd like to introduce the governor, Mario Cuomo, but before I do, I want to show you these two easels behind you. He takes the cloth off, and he said, now this easel has my signing contract with the Yankees, where I was paid a signing bonus of $1,600. And on my other side is Mario's signing contract, where he got $3,000. And he said, Governor Cuomo got a bigger bonus than I did. So they all laughed, and Mario didn't know any of this was going to come down, but he loved Mickey Mantle, and it was a great story that day. And Governor Cuomo was a power-hitting catcher and outfielder, and many people said he would have been a real good baseball player had he stayed with it.
That's interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I saw his name. I said, oh, okay. Now, 2013, you started getting, as I said, more known major leaguers. Craig Biggio, who was inducted into the Hall of Fame last year, Cooperstown Hall of Fame. Ralph Branca, Ed Kranepool.
Oh boy! Yep.
Yes. Very popular here in New York with the Mets, and Lou Whitaker. Now, with Lou Whitaker, was he originally from New York?
He was. He was actually from the Bronx, born and raised till he was about 5, and then he moved south. And Whitaker, I had some college students write a thesis supporting his induction into Cooperstown, because his numbers are the fourth or best statistics by a second baseman in the history of baseball. He could easily be inducted. Easily. Kranepool was a lifelong Met, played 17 years.
Right.
His first year, I think he was right out of James Monroe High School and was either 17 or 18 years old. And
he never played minor league ball. He
never played minor league ball. No. Hit a home run in the '69 series that the Mets won against Baltimore. And I think he retired when he was 35. And I think if the story is correct, Steve, I think his roommate was Joe Torre on the Mets. Torre became the manager and released him. And Eddie was saying that he thought he was safe because Joe was his friend. And Joe called him and said, I'm sorry to tell you this, but we're releasing you. So he said baseball works in funny ways, but he gave a great speech. Yeah, his son lives in Boston, and his son and grandchildren came to the induction wearing Red Sox jerseys and Red Sox hats. That was funny.
Oh, God.
Branca is another guy who he just passed away last year at 89, I think. And Branca was probably one of the nicest men I've ever met in my life. Pitched for the Dodgers, gave up Bobby Thompson's home run, in 51, the shot heard around the world. And he really took it like a man. Didn't complain, didn't whine, and he was a real gentleman. And probably, I'm not sure whether a lot of people know this, but when Jackie Robinson came up in 47, Ralph was his best friend. And Ralph was the guy who accepted him right away into the team, into the clubhouse, and was very close with Jackie. And they show a little bit of that in the movie 42. But he told me that Jackie was great for the team, and was a gentleman and a good guy. So Branca got a lot of respect for the kind of man he was, not just the player.
Good. That's interesting. 2014. Now some very well-known people here. Amongst them, just recently retired broadcaster Vince Scully,
Yes.
the former commissioner Bud Selig, Rico Petrocelli, Elroy Face, Dave Justy. I remember him with the Astros. Rocky Colavito. Now Vince Scully, I guess, with his work with the Brooklyn Dodgers, then going out to L.A., one of the greatest sportscasters of all time. And now, was he from New York, or just his association with the Dodgers?
No, he was from New York. He was born in New York City. Yep. And the funny story about Vince Scully is that he and Branca were very good friends, and he was told in his career early not to make friends with the players because you wouldn't be able to be critical of them on a radio or TV broadcast. But he sort of disregarded that, and he and Branca became very close. So after the season, they went to the Vatican to meet the Pope. And Vin's mother was devoutly religious and was so excited that her son was going to meet the Pope. And so they fly to the Vatican, and there's a protocol involved. When you go into the room, you stand in a certain circle, and the Pope will walk by and bless each one of you, and so forth. And Vince said, I was so excited to meet the Pope, and so they're in Vatican City in Italy, and here comes the Pope, and he sees Ralph Branca. And he says, Ralph, my son, it's a honor to meet you. Let me give you my blessing. And the Pope was thrilled to meet Ralph Branca and his wife Ann, and he's chatting with Ralph about the Dodgers and stuff, and Vin is standing right next to him, and the Pope turns to Vin and says, "Are you with him?" And Vin tells the story on a video that he sent us, his induction video. It was like I was just window dressing for the Pope, and he said I had to come home and tell my mom the story that Ralph was the big star, but Vin was and still is the best announcer I've ever heard, and really he doesn't fly much anymore, so he sent an induction video which we played, and gracious, and he was also really good friends with Johnny Padres, and so there's a little bit of a Brooklyn Dodger theme to the Hall of Fame with Padres and Branca and Vin, and this year with Sandy Koufax.
And the thing with what was unique about Vince Scully, he never had he did the broadcast all by himself. He never had an analyst with him. He did everything, and for doing it for as long as he did, it's just amazing. The same style, he called many a great ball game, and that's the thing I'll miss about Vin, his style, and to make the right call at the right time. It was amazing. It was amazing. Now,
very
Bud
correct.
Selig, yeah. Now, Bud Selig, commissioner at a time when was the steroid era, and I think he handled that situation pretty well at that time. The only thing about him I didn't like was that All-Star game where it wound up being a tie, and then he comes up with this rule about with the All-Star game. Now, whoever wins the All-Star game gets home field for the World Series. I thought that was ludicrous. Thank God they did away with that now. They stopped that, but I didn't. I felt that didn't make any sense at all.
That's correct. That's correct. he was an interesting figure to be commissioner when he was, and on one hand, the home run chase between Sosa and McGwire was good for the game and fans, and people really didn't know at the time about the performance-enhancing drugs, which technically were not illegal at the time. And I think he was in a tough position because, by many people's estimates, there were as many as 60 to 70% of the players were taking some kind of enhancement. So it was such a prevalent thing, and one player saw the guy next to him doing well, and why not me? And so he was in a tough spot, and I think he navigated through that okay. Makes for another really fascinating conversation about whether Barry Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame, because clearly he was a Hall of Famer before he ever took any enhancement, and I don't think he was ever. Was he suspended? I don't think he was for any enhancements. And
no, he wasn't. No.
Ivan Rodriguez got in last year, and Piazza got in the year before, and they were both had some kind of rumor attached to them to some degree. So, in a larger picture, does Bonds belong in the Hall of Fame? If he was in New York, he'd be in our Hall of Fame. There's a history of interesting things in baseball that they used in the early part of the century where they would alter the ball, and Gaylord Perry used Vaseline and corked bats, and so there was a lot of corner cutting for many players many years. So I'm not sure whether I think the enhancement thing, well, certainly they've got that under control, and certainly not a great thing. You still have to hit the ball. You still have to throw the ball. So I'm a little bit more lenient on that than most. One of the things that makes our Hall of Fame a little bit different, we do have an advisory board, and it's not based on home runs or runs batted in or wins. It's based on you being a good guy and having a good legacy and what you've contributed to the game. And who says you have to get 75% of the sports writer vote? That's something I don't really understand. And if you and I own the Hall of Fame, Steve, why would we give that power away to sports writers? I don't. It doesn't make sense to me.
How do you feel about that too? Speaking about that, how do you feel about the idea of sports writers dictating whether you enter the Hall of Fame or not?
I really.
I don't think it's fair.
I don't see it, and they've done better recently in taking sports writers' votes away who didn't use the vote or who sold their vote, which they did in the past, or didn't fill out an entire ballot. So, and plus, many of the sports writers that had ballots weren't really active anymore. So they've tried to get more proactive about that. But my advice would be, sure, let the sports writers have a vote, but let that be one component of the election process. And then I would have a committee be an equal component and say, gee, okay, if Craig Biggio's 4 votes short, does the committee vote to put him over the top? And I hate to see Tim Raines or Jim Rice have to go to the final year of a ballot and not make it because of a vote or two. That's what I don't like.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, do you guys go on a first place vote system, or like they do in Major League Baseball, how many first place votes you get, how many second place votes. How do you do it?
Well, we get nominations all year long, and if somebody gets nominated, we run their data, we run their career, and it's basically on a point system where if you played in college, you got a point, let's say. If you played minor league ball, you got another point. If you played in the major leagues, you get a point. If you umpire, you get a point. If you are a sports writer, you get a point. If you're a groundskeeper, you get a point. If you're active in the game, keep checking the boxes across. And as long as you've been active and played different roles, that's fine. You know, we get to a point where some people do mount campaigns for people, and that's a good thing. You know, if you nominated, let's say, Whitey Ford or somebody, he's easy because he's in Cooperstown, but let's take another guy who is on the cusp. If I got 8 or 9 nominations for him, that will weigh, you know. This year, C.B. Buckner, who's a major league umpire, is getting inducted. He's a product of the Bonnie's baseball program in New York City. And John Franco, as a kid, grew up in that Bonnie's program. And the fellow who was instrumental in that, Jerry Katsky, got inducted last year. And people who run those youth programs, Steve, they don't do it for money. They don't make a lot of money. So you put your time in for that, for kids, that's a big, big plus for you.
Okay. Now the 2015 inductees, again, pretty good group. Kenny Singleton played for the Orioles and the Mets, Expos, and he's the Yes Network announcer. Very good player, excellent player back then. Frank Viola, a product of St. John's University, along with John Franco.
Yes.
Dennis Leonard, remember him? Lee Mazzilli, who's one. You know, I'm not a Met fan, I'm a Yankee fan, but when he came up in the system, the farm system for the Mets, he became a favorite of mine. I liked the way he played the game, and was a student of the game. I mean, he was fundamentally sound. Wound up being a first base coach for the Yankees during those great championship years, where he worked under Torrey. And I think he has a son that's playing in a minor league system right now, I think.
He does.
I'm not sure. Tom Browning with the Reds. Remember he pitched a no-hitter back in the day.
Perfect game.
Yes. Spencer Ross. I remember this man. Excellent play-by-play announcer. My God, he was good. He was a lot of fun to listen to. Excitable, but accurate. You know, very good. I'm glad to see, when I saw his name, I was like, okay, good. And those are the more well-known ones that I know of. Lee does a lot of good work, community work. Very popular in the New York area.
He does, as does John Franco. That was a good induction year for a variety of reasons. And one of the things, you know, you learn things about each of these inductees as you go through the process. And when Frank Viola got inducted, he got up to speak, and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "you know, I'm thrilled to be here tonight for my induction." And he said, "But I'm really thrilled to meet one of my boyhood idols, Dennis Leonard." He said, "We were both growing up on Long Island, and Dennis was a few years older, And he said when Dennis made the big leagues, we knew that we might be able to make it too. And he actually spoke to Dennis from the podium and said, to be in the same Hall of Fame with you is an honor, and Leonard went to Iona College and was a great college pitcher, never recruited for college, never got a scholarship, and was perhaps, I think, maybe the best pitcher in Kansas City Royals history, still to this day. Was on those great teams with Amos Otis and Freddie Patek and John Mayberry and all those guys, and UL Washington, and they, Leonard they gave the Yankees fits in the 70s, and
they did.
So that was a great year. Viola spoke, and he advised all the people in the room. We've been sold out every year we've had this event. We're sold out again this year already. He looked at the parents and he said, listen, anybody who has a child playing sports, boy or girl, he goes, my advice to you is have them play more than one sport. Not just baseball, not just basketball or football, but play two or more so they don't get burned out, because there's so much activity with AAU or summer league play, or some of these kids are playing 80 baseball games a summer. And he said they get burned out. It's inevitable, And he said let them play golf or bowling or something, just so they're not wrapped around one sport so completely. And he was really riveting in his speech. He, of course, is the pitching coach for the Las Vegas Mets, and he was the guy who really tutored Syndergaard and DeGrom and Harvey and Matz. Those were all his guys. And, I asked him, Frank, are you surprised they all broke down? And he said, well, not really. He said they throw so hard. The torque on their arms, the stress is so severe. If your arm isn't physically built for it, you're going to have an issue sooner or later. And, of course, that translates into this year's big story, Sandy Koufax, who retired at age 32, who, Steve, used to throw 200 pitches in a game. I mean, in the 1965 Game 7 World Series against the Twins, he won the game 2-0, said his curveball didn't work at all, threw all fastballs the entire game, and threw like 186 pitches in that game. And this is a guy who was one of the greatest pitchers ever for 6 or 7 years, but at 32 had to walk away, and it's in a natural motion to throw that hard, pitching a baseball. And it's going to happen, to anyone. It's, and Frank said there's just no way around it. I think that's why the advent of a closer now is important, and why we've seen a guy like Mariano Rivera come to dominate the game and what he did. And the other thing is, since we're having a Hall of Fame discussion, closers have gotten no respect as inductees. Lee Smith should be in the Hall of Fame. Jeff Reardon should be in the Hall of Fame. I think Trevor Hoffman will probably go in this year, but Eckersley was a starter for half his career. I think there's only a handful of relievers. Hoyt Wilhelm's in, Bruce Sutter is in, but not many. And I can't wait for Mariano to go in, because it'll usher a new era of respect.
Well, he's a no-brainer.
Yes.
He's a no-brainer. I mean, for what he's accomplished, the most successful closer in baseball history. There's no doubt about his induction, that's for sure. I do agree with you. Like Lee Smith should be in. Even Dennis Eckersley should be in. I mean, he accomplished what John Smoltz did, being a starter and then switching over to as a reliever. And Smoltz is it.
Yeah.
So if Smoltz is in, I don't see why Eckersley should not be in as well.
Eckersley is in, as a matter of fact. Eckersley and Gossage are both in. Yeah. He got in, I think, his first year of
I
voting.
remember Gossage.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would take Lee Smith or even Franco. Franco has more saves than any left-hand pitcher in baseball, any left-hand relief pitcher. And he has 400 and change saves. And he was really, he's 5'8", Steve. He's 160 pounds dripping wet and tough as a cat burglar. The guy was, he got everybody out. And the people don't realize, Franco is very quiet and he's very polite, and Joe Russo is in the Hall of Fame, who was the coach of Franco and Viola. And just loved both guys, And I said, Joe, with Viola and Franco on your staff, how did you ever lose a game? He goes, well, that's a good question. We lost some tough games in the end. And he said that Frank Viola had many pitches, slider, curveball, fastball, changeup. He said, Franco came right at you with a fastball. Here it is, hit it. And nobody could. And St. John's was a dominant baseball program back
then. Yes, it was. Viola, though, I think he was on the. Was he on? If I'm not mistaken, wasn't he on the '87 Twins championship team?
That's correct. And really, he was really a gutty pitcher then, and pitching for a small market team, and that was when he was at his best. And he actually did well for the Mets too. He was still a real legitimate pitcher there, and his arm sort of broke down as he got older, and but he had it was a World Series Game 7 winner. And, should he be in Cooperstown? Who knows? We're reviewing Jack Morris's career now in college. We're having students write a review.
They still talk about Morris shouldn't be. They still talk about Morris as far as not being in the Hall of Fame, and I think he should as well. I remember the year that Viola and Franco made the All-Star team the same year. That was great. I remember that. Yeah.
Now, the real interesting story about that induction year that you just mentioned is Kenny Singleton, who, of course, came up with the Mets and got traded to Montreal for Rusty Staub. And when Kenny got up to give his speech, Kenny won the Johnny Padres Lifetime Achievement Award. That's our highest award that we give, our Hall of Fame. It's like the MVP award. And Singleton got up, and he said, people don't know this, but when I was growing up, my father bought Ralph Branca's house. We literally moved into Ralph Branca's house in Rye, New York, when they sold it. And he said, what a coincidence. He said, I've gotten to know Ralph very well, and what a great guy. Of course, everyone loved Ralph. But Kenny, of all the baseball announcers on TV, he's my favorite now. He's just got a smooth voice, Steve. It's just...
He does.
Very, very great voice.
He does.
He's a good analyst of the game, and he tells good stories. And the Yes Network has a lot of good announcers, but he's my favorite.
Absolutely. That's right, because they're overloaded with ex-players, and I think two of them should be, like, Paul O'Neill should be a hitting coach somewhere, and David Cohn should be a pitching coach somewhere. I'll tell you.
Agreed.
Yeah. But you never know. With Jeter now being the CEO of the Miami Marlins, you never know. He may pick the pocket of the Yankee organization and take maybe one or two of those guys. Well, especially Cohn, because I think he would be an excellent pitching coach.
Oh, he would, yeah. I know he's doing some Fox TV work now in the playoffs, and
Yeah, he is.
So I was talking to Paul O'Neill on the phone because he's being inducted this year, with Sandy and Dunston and some other guys. And the night
honor
before,
well deserved.
Yes, the night before, I was listening to Cone and O'Neill on the game, and Cone was really needling O'Neill, just kidding him, and so he says to O'Neill, one of the guys struck out and had a little bit of a tantrum in the dugout, and Cone goes, "Gee, Paul, it looks like you when you took the bat to the water cooler." And I don't think Paul.
I'll never forget that.
I don't think he appreciated him saying that. And Cone just was needling him, and it was funny to listen to. But Paul didn't take the bait. He just wasn't, I don't think he wanted to be remembered for that.
Well, listen, he was my hero when I saw him do that, because at least he was. He changed when he came to the Yankees in '93. He automatically changed the culture of that Yankee team back then, because they were a lifeless bunch of people for many years, and he came over from Cincinnati, and he was already sporting a World Series ring from the Cincinnati Reds, whose manager was a former Yankee, Lou Piniella. And and automatically there was a change in that Yankee team. I truly believe he made a better ball player out of Bernie Williams, made him a better outfielder, a better hitter, and overall that clubhouse became a more mature clubhouse. And in '94, if it wasn't for the strike season, the Yankees would have went to the World Series, and I think they would have been playing the Montreal Expos that year. And then we all know what happened in '96, and the rest was history. And Paul wound up winning 4 more championships. And
he did. And I think that strike year, O'Neill batted like .355 or .354 or something, and he won the batting crown in the strike-shortened season. And but Cone, ever being the prankster himself, like Munson was, they were in the clubhouse one day, and Paul had struck out 4 times the night before, and so Steinbrenner walks in the clubhouse, and he's talking to players, and Cone pulls him aside and says, "George, listen, Paul had a rough game last night. If you have any constructive advice you can give him, perhaps you might want to go over and say something to him about maybe he's swinging too soon or swinging too late or whatever." And he said that's, he really, George went over and tried to talk to O'Neill, and you could see the steam coming out of his ears, and Cone was just laughing from across the room. But that's the way Cone was, like Munson was, and I think you're right that O'Neill did bring that intensity to the Yankee, locker room and team, and on the field persona he was the face of that team, he's a well-deserved inductee this year, and happy for him, and a great class, last year was special because of Willie and John, and we had another guy last year, Jim Messier, who was on the Yankees. And Jim Messier was born with one leg shorter than the other, and his calf muscle was never developed. So when Jim was a young boy, he didn't ride a bike or play baseball until he got into high school, and he ended up being like 6'2", and his physique, he filled out, and he did well, and he got to play, but he had to have several surgeries on his leg, and he was pitching for the Oakland Athletics one game, and John Kruk was doing an ESPN voice, broadcast in the booth, And Messier, when he pitched, he looked, because of that leg, he looked like he was hurt. And Kruk kept saying on ESPN that the Angels or the Athletics were negligent letting him pitch, and he's clearly hurt, and he's hobbling out there, and why are they letting a guy that's hurt pitch and so forth? And then when the inning was over, they pulled him aside and said, "No, he's fine. He has a disabled calf. Like, that's the way he grew up." And so Kruk felt terrible and sought him out and apologized to him because he didn't know. But Messier, when he was inducted last year, he got up and he paid tribute to Willie Randolph. He said, "You don't know what it was like to have a guy like Randolph in the clubhouse, who was really a great guy for everybody." And, it's nice to see these inductees pay tribute to somebody else on their own induction night. It's amazing.
True. That is true. Now, you talked about in this year's inductees. We talked about Paul O'Neill. We talked about Sandy Koufax. You have a gentleman here that was a pretty good player in his own right, Carl Yastrzemski.
Oh yeah!
What an amazing hitter. Before Miguel Cabrera won the Triple Crown, he was the last Triple Crown winner when he won it in '67.
That's correct, with a batting average of 301. Yaz, I'll tell you two stories. Yaz grew up on Long Island. His family were potato farmers, and he was a hard-working kid from a hard-working family. Really blue-collar people, hard-working, and grew up always working hard for everything he got, and made himself into a great ball player, and never was fortunate enough to win the World Series. But Rico Petrocelli, who we talked about earlier, was on the team in '67 and in '75 when they were in the series. And I asked Rico about Yaz and Fisk and the different guys, and he said that both Fisk and Yaz were professionals. They showed up every day, played hard every day, didn't tolerate any nonsense or goofing around, and they never cheated their employer a day. They played hard every inning of every game. And I said, Rico, 1975 was one of my favorite World Series. You played the Reds, and I said, I'm really curious about, Game 6. When Fisk hit the home run, I said, I've read all the books about the game. And I said, you started off that inning with an 11-pitch walk. And he goes, yeah, he did. He goes, I was battling vertigo the whole second half of the season. And he said, I didn't even really know it was vertigo. And he said, I wasn't myself, but, I went up there and gave it my all. And Rico grew up in the Bronx and wanted desperately to be a Yankee, and they wouldn't sign him. They said he was too small. Because Rico grew up, and his favorite player was Rizzuto. So he goes to Fenway Park, and he hits the first 10 pitches over the Green Monster. And so they take him upstairs to Yawkey's office, Rico's father and himself. And Tom Yawkey's office was very high-grain mahogany wood. And Enrico's father just looked around the office, and he kept looking at the wood. And he goes, Enrico, this is a Nasa wood in this office. And he kept saying, like, how beautiful the office was. So they come in and they type up a contract, and they gave Rico $60,000 for a signing bonus, which in '64 was a lot of money. So he signs, and Rico's father said, Rico, congratulations, you are now a baseball player, and that was it for him. Spent his whole career with the Red Sox. So here he is on second base, Game 6, 1975. Red Sox losing 3-2, and if they lose that game, they're done. The Reds win 4-2. And Red Sox Fenway Park is packed. It's totally full, and Rico leads off the inning with a walk, and then another guy gets on. A couple of guys make out, and so there's 2 outs and 2 on. And the manager pinch hits Bernie Carbo, up to pinch hit, the 8th inning. Rico's
I
on
remember
second
him.
base. And Bernie Carbo was the Rookie of the Year with the Reds in 1973, but had some issues, and they traded him to the Cardinals, they traded him to the Brewers, they traded him to the Red Sox. Well, when he was with the Reds, Sparky Anderson loved Bernie Carbo like a son, really liked him, hated to see him get traded, but the GM traded him. And so before the game, Rico walked over in batting practice and gave Sparky a hug and said, "Sparky, I never thanked you for all the things you did for me and helped me become a real man and helped me grow up." And he said, "Thank you for looking out for me when I was on the Reds." And they hugged and they had tears in their eyes, and Sparky wished him the best. Now here comes Bernie up to pinch hit with 2 guys on base. Bernie's a left-hand hitter, and the pitcher was Raleigh Eastwick, who ended up with the Yankees years later, and he's a right-hand pitcher. So out comes Sparky to take him out of the game. And Johnny Bench says, no, leave Raleigh in. He's good to go. And so Sparky doesn't come out. And Sparky says, in my head, I knew I had to take him out, the pitcher, but he said I couldn't do it. So Eastwick throws Carbo a pitch, strike 1, and then he throws him a pitch, and Rico's on second base, and Rico said, "Rennie, Bernie's swing was the worst swing I ever saw. Worse than Todd Frazier's home run the other night. The swing was just terrible, And he said 45,000 people in Fenway Park all groaned and moaned because they knew that Bernie was done. He's toast. He's out. Our World Series dreams are going down in flames with Bernie Carbo. And Eastwick hung the next pitch and hits it out of the park in dead center field. And Rico's standing there watching the ball go out of the park. He said, "Rennie, the stadium rocked. It really rocked." He said, "I couldn't believe it shook." And he said, "We all danced around the bases. And then the game goes into extra innings. Fisk hits the game winner in the 12th inning. And Rico said, 'Damn, didn't the stadium rock again?'" And Rico lives in New Hampshire now. And Steve, Rico looks like he could play just like Willie Randolph. They could play tomorrow if they had to.
Wow. That's great. That's great. You have here, you got Michael Kay was inducted last year.
Right.
Great TV voice of the Yankees. And you also have here John Sterling, the radio voice of the Yankees, and hasn't missed a game in like 25 years or so. I think they said this guy he's called every Yankee game for like the last 25 years.
Amazing.
Unbelievable.
Amazing.
A great announcer. And when I saw his name, I was like, "Wow, now that's an honor."
Michael Kay he nominated John this year, and Michael's all business. He doesn't kid around, and he said, "Rennie, you should really look at John. His career is, very noteworthy." And he said, doesn't text, doesn't email. You got to talk to him on the phone. But he said, "I'm nominating him, and he should be in." And he was a very easy yes by the committee. And I've got to be totally honest with you, Steve. 5 years ago, I couldn't listen to John and Susan Waldman. I just couldn't listen to either one of them. And over the years, now I love them both. now I get it. I get their shtick. They obviously play off each other well, but I just couldn't, and a lot of people said the same thing. Acquired taste, now he's so settled in his job, and he's about knowledgeable announcer, and he embellishes the home run calls, but now I have no problem listening to him and enjoy it, look forward to it.
Will Susan Waldman be inducted into the New York State Baseball Hall of Fame? You have no women.
That's correct.
On these, from 27. And I feel her contribution to the game of baseball is impeccable. She basically the way for female journalists and sportscasters, and the great job that she does on the Yankee broadcast. I feel that she belongs there. What's your opinion?
Have you met her, Steve?
I'm trying to get her on the show. I mean, she's very tough to get a hold of. It's like very tough. But I haven't met her personally. But I would love to have her on the show.
Yeah, we would consider her. She has to go through the process, and we would make the phone calls. But you're right; she has done a remarkable job, and she and John work well together as a team. There's no question. And you're also correct; we do not have a woman in the Hall of Fame. She would be the first.
Yes.
It's a good point.
She should. Yeah, I think you should really consider it. Yeah, you should consider her. She's been doing a great job in sports for years. I mean, going way back to, as far as I remember her, from the mid '80s.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah. So food for thought. Food for thought there. Does Joe Torre get in sometime in the future?
Yes. As a matter of fact, next year will probably be Joe's year, and a great guy, and we'll probably also put his brother Frank in, who passed away a few years ago, who also played with the Braves. I think was on the World Series Brave team in '58, and had a great career in the game. And Joe absolutely should go in, and I think that Joe wanted to go in Cooperstown first, which he did, and he's so busy because he works for the commissioner, and I think that now he has a little bit more time and has gotten some things out of the way, so we look for him to go in next year.
Okay. What about the Scooter? God rest his soul.
I think he's born in New Jersey, if I'm not mistaken. And
okay.
Although he did work in New York for 40 years, so I guess technically he does qualify.
Yeah.
We may annex New Jersey eventually, though, Steve. We may just acquire the state.
Call it rename it the New York, New Jersey Baseball Hall of Fame, something like that.
Yeah. Right. I've been actually trying to reach Phil's daughter, and I need to talk to Marty about that. And I heard Marty speak not long ago, and actually in the springtime, about his book that he wrote on Casey Stengel. What a funny guy Marty is.
Oh, very interesting book.
And a great writer.
Yes. He is a great writer. I have the book, and it's fascinating reading, and about Casey Stengel, and I had a great time having Marty on the show, and The stories that he told about Casey, some of it was hilarious. I'll tell you. Casey was he was a great manager, but he was a character.
Oh yeah. Marty came up the same time Munson did when he was PR guy with the Yankees. And he sort of said the same thing that Willie Randolph said. He said that, how much he misses Thurman, thinks about him all the time, what a great teammate Thurman was, what a great clubhouse guy he was, and those are some of my favorite Yankee teams with Nettles and Chambliss and Munson and Roy White. And that's when they got good again, is when Munson became a star.
Yeah. Yes. And he was the Yankee captain, and he did a great job. I was so sad that month in August when he passed. I couldn't believe it. I was in a state of shock. I'll tell you, oh my God.
Are you a
true
lifelong
leader
Yankee
on that
fan,
ball
Steve?
club. I said, yes, I am lifelong. Yeah.
When did you start?
I mean, I
rooting for
support the Mets, but actually in '66, when I was a kid. Yeah.
That's great.
So it was. Yeah. So I've seen the good times, and I've seen the bad times, and yeah. So.
We'd love to have you come to the induction this year if you can. Please be our guest, and we'd love to have you sit at the table with Marty and John Sterling. We'd love to have you.
That's very nice of you. Yeah. Well, you know what? I could get at the end of the show. I'll you send me the information. Email it to me, or yeah. So we'll try to make that happen. That'll be a lot of fun.
Oh, it'd be great. You'd love it.
Now for 2018, who right now? If you, I don't know if you, who are your candidates? We mentioned Joe Torre. Who would be some other candidates for next year?
We're still early in that process. We've got a long list. We started around 30, 40 names, and then we pare it down. Last year we did two pioneers of baseball. One of the first Jewish players, Lipman Pike, who I think was the first baseball player ever to be paid money to play. And we did Edsel Walker from the Negro Leagues, who's from Albany, who played with Satchel Paige and the great Negro Leagues. Tremendous player. There's a field named after him in Albany. And so we try and include those people also. We like the pioneers of baseball. We want to try and get some people that are older while they're still here with us. I think Susan Waldman is a great name to consider for certain. There's no shortage of Yankees or Mets, Steve, to go in.
Okay. I also see here from 2017 the Buffalo Bisons. You took the whole team. You inducted the entire team.
The whole organization.
That's interesting.
Yeah. They date back to the 1880s. Had a major league franchise for, I think, 2 years. And they are one of the leading teams in the country, in the minor leagues. Done a great job marketing the team. And they great organization, and they have been trying to get a major league franchise back there. I think Montreal is probably ahead of them again. But great work. They've had a lot of players come through Buffalo to the major leagues. I think they're an affiliate
very interesting.
Toronto right now, I think, is their
The
major
Blue
league
Jays.
affiliate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yes. That is interesting. I see you also have Sherwin Dunston, and I remember him, great ball player with the Cubs and the Giants.
He works for the
shortstop.
Giants now, yeah, and had a rocket arm, and he lives in San Francisco. He's flying in with his family, and like Willie, you won't meet a nicer guy than Sean Johnston. A real gentleman, very excited about getting in, very deserved pick. 16 years in the major leagues, all-star shortstop twice. You know, and you don't play 16 years in the major leagues unless you're a good player. Very happy for Sean.
Yes. Now you also have Andy Van Slyke. Now I remember him. He was a good ball player. He was a character as well. Played on those pirate teams which featured Bobby Bonilla and Barry Bonds. And,
that's right.
Yes.
Van Slyke is from Utica, New York, and he was a tremendous high school basketball player and had gotten many offers to play at the top basketball colleges in the country. Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky. Could have played anywhere. And many people think that he could have played in the NBA. And so he ended up being in the first round draft pick in the country, and goes to the Cardinals. He got traded to the Pirates, played in center, Bonilla and right, Bonds in left, and they were just a hair behind those great Atlanta Brave teams. And but a real nice guy. Can't wait to meet him. He called us from Italy a couple weeks ago on the phone. His parents are coming. They're in their 80s. And tremendous defensive outfielder. Major League Baseball sends us a video highlight of all the players' careers. And there's 5 or 6 minutes alone of Van Slyke diving, making catches over his back and everything. A real nice guy.
That's good. I tell you, this has been great. Talking about this, as I said, I didn't know if it wasn't for Marty making a statement how he got inducted on my Facebook page, I would have never known. And I said, "What? New York State Baseball Hall of Fame? What is this all about?" And then I go on your site, and I was like, "Really?" I was like, that's why I said I had to have you on the show and let's talk about this. But,
I'm so glad to be on the show tonight, and we think we've done a nice job growing this year by year and mixing and matching the inductees and getting the right formula. And we've been well received by all the major league teams and the union and the alumni association out in Denver, and Brooks Robinson sends us a letter of support every year. And but the nice thing, Steve, is when you see a college coach or a high school coach and he gets inducted with Kenny Singleton or Frank Viola or Rico Petrocelli, and they're all on the same platform, the same microphone, the same dais, and the winner is baseball. You know, it's a fabulous game. Don't have to be a major league star to get in. You know, can be an umpire or a little league coach. And last year when we had those little league kids from Maine Endwell, Franco and Willie got up, shook each kid's hand right where they were on stage, had their picture taken with them, and they said, "Kids, don't ever forget that you did this. You know, don't for a minute let this go by. You know, you accomplished." The whole country was watching them win that Little League World Series, and not a lot of teams from the States win that, you know, and those kids were just the nicest kids, and I don't think they knew who Willie Randolph and John Franco were, but they certainly enjoyed the night. Their parents knew who they were.
And I take it you take into consideration the level of community service work that a lot of these athletes do for the community and the charity work, all that comes into play as well?
Absolutely. And, I'm not sure that the public knows this, but maybe in the city they might. But after 9/11, Steve, John Franco and O'Neill were two of the most unselfish guys who went to different, places to meet with people who had loss and people who lost people in 9/11. And O'Neill and Franco did that on their own dime, their own time, and they were really very generous and supportive and showed the true character of who they really were. And I'm sure they never got the press that they could have gotten, and I'm sure they didn't even want the publicity, but they were very pro-New York and pro-supportive of the survivors after that happened, and gained immeasurable respect from me and for people who know about that.
Yes, I remember that day very well, and my God, I still don't go down there. Really. And it's amazing. What blows my mind is some of these people, they call it Ground Zero at that time, and people want to come down there to see it. I'm like, why? It's a big grave. Why?
Yeah.
There's nothing fascinating about it, but that's how some people's minds are, unfortunately. But we are out of time. But Rene, this is what you're doing is fantastic. Just what you've done is create a whole new aspect of achievement in the world of baseball. And we have a Cooperstown Hall of Fame, and now we have a New York State Baseball Hall of Fame, and the biggest market in sports history. And it made sense to do this, so I commend you, and you should induct yourself in the Hall of Fame for it.
Well, that's an interesting thought, but thank you so much for inviting me on your show. You do a great job with your show, and
thank you.
So pleased to be on it.
No problem. You're welcome here on Sports Tuesday anytime, and definitely we'll have you back, and we'll talk about the 2018 inductees, and do it like that. Who gets the Johnny Padres Lifetime Achievement Award for next year? And so this was a lot of fun. A lot of fun, and hopefully Susan Waldman will be the first woman inductee. And there she is. Just mentioned to her, Steve Manderson was in your corner and pushed for you to get in. So,
be glad to do that, Steve. Thank you so much.
All right, listen, you take care, and God bless.
Thank you, Steve. Bye-bye.
All right. Source Nation, that was Rene LeRoux, the Executive Director of the New York State Baseball Hall of Fame. Fascinating what he has done. Started this in 2011, and it continues to grow and grow. And each year you get more known players and baseball figures, and it's just fantastic. And I like it. I like it. So I thank him for coming on, and definitely we'll have him back down the road to talk about next year's inductees. Okay. Want to thank Tracy Martin in the first hour, baseball historian who has a baseball museum, and which features vintage baseball memorabilia going way back to the 1800s, and It is fascinating. Check the website out as www.vintagebaseballcollector.com, and it is fascinating to see. If you're in Ohio, in that area, do check it out for yourself. I think I may do that one day because that's the kind of stuff I like to see and everything. So that is great. That is great. So that is it for me right now. And again, I want to thank Rene LeRoux for coming on to talk about the New York State Baseball Hall of Fame. And maybe he does need to branch it out to New Jersey. Rename it the New York, New Jersey Baseball Hall of Fame. And you get a lot more inductees there as well. So that is it. So until next week, when really by that time the World Series should be starting up, and hopefully my Yankees will be there. It remains to be seen. So we'll see how they do. See what happens if they can beat the Houston Astros, and we'll see what happens. So until next week, as I always say, be good and be safe. Take care, everybody.